most scientists will still dismiss the so-called evidence, and they're right to do so. You know, I was just listening to Adam Frank, who's a really terrific scientist that I admire, that's written some wonderful papers about extraterrestrial civilizations. And, you know, as he rightly said, you know, there's three sort of black and white videos. It's not enough to convince me or anybody else in the scientific world. And he's absolutely right about that, you know. But what he's not right about, and what most scientists are still can't wrap their mind around, is actually looking into the decades of evidence that we do have that sits alongside and supports the videos that have come out and the testimony from real pilots, both commercial and military, the generals. I mean, look, the research is there.
Yeah. Welcome to Far Out with Faust, everybody. I am Faust Chicho, and today I am excited and honored and delighted to be joined by none other than Thomas Jane. Most of you are like, hey, I've heard that name before. If you're watching, you probably recognize his face. Thomas is an iconic American actor. He's known for appearing in such incredible films as Boogie Nights, Deep Blue Sea. He played Frank Castle in The Punisher back in 2004. And to this day, as I was just telling him, I can attest for, that is one of the most beloved comic book roles in the comic book community, which I am plugged into to this day. He starred in The Mist, he starred in The Predator, and his television roles include Mickey Mantle in the television film 61, and also the HBO series Hung, which probably a lot of you still remember. Also, sci-fi Amazon video series The Expanse. And he's also the founder of Raw Studios, an entertainment company that releases comic books that he has written, the first of which was called Bad Planet. He also made his directorial debut with a crime thriller, Dark Country, which he also starred in. And recently, he has been speaking out and speaking with many people on the forefront and vanguard of the Disclosure Project, the Disclosure Movement, and trying to get and wrestle some of the truth that has been hidden from us out. And that is how I heard, well, obviously I knew who Thomas was, but it is an honor. Thank you for beaming in, brother. It's an honor to have you here.
Right on, man. Right on.
Absolutely.
Happy to be here.
Very
Good old
cool.
Georgia. I love it here.
It's hot, right?
It's hot today.
It is definitely.
It's 95 degrees out there right now,
Steamy.
so it's nice to be in this dark little studio.
Yeah, yeah. LA doesn't get this hot, probably, certainly not this early in the day.
Yeah, and it's the humidity, you know.
Oh, yeah.
LA, we're blessed with very little humidity, so it's a different vibe. It still gets hot though.
Yeah, it definitely still gets hot, but
Getting hot all over.
that's
lately.
yeah, basically. It is summer though.
What happens?
That is what happens. So, tell me, my friend, at what were you always interested in this, and what has brought you kind of?
The
I mean, I
UFO
know
subject?
Yeah, the UFO subject. I know that these days
Right.
it's much more accepted and mainstream than it ever has been.
Absolutely.
Thankfully, and I know from the way coming from acting and
Right.
filmmaking that you can't just go around talking about anything you want. You know, you got to be careful.
No, that's true. I wouldn't be doing this if it weren't for the sort of the openness that's happened over the last 4 years, for sure. And in fact, I've been into this for a good 15 years and totally content to keep it to myself. A very few conversations with people about UFOs, especially in the industry. You know, they're still misunderstood. The subject is still misunderstood. It's still kind of confusing to people why these have been sort of brought into the public